Hey, what's up, guys? Jeremy here, your host of the Overtime Podcast, and I just want to say thanks for tuning in. Overtime is a podcast that we do at the end of every series here at Northpoint, where we just take Sunday's message further in hopes that it becomes helpful for you and your life and your faith. And we've been in a series called Rules for the Road, talking about the different roads of life that we are all on. We all want to end up somewhere, and so we just want to end up there on purpose and make sure we actually do get to our desired destination, whether it's with our marriage, our parenting, our faith, our finances, our job, whatever dreams that we have in life. And so we're just talking about that and what that looks like. And so we're looking at questions throughout the whole series, and we get to have our entire teaching team here to talk through it today. So I'm really excited, and I just hope that it helps you in your life and your faith. What I do want to talk about, if we were to hone in on some current events and some news. If you guys didn't know that Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk agreed to a cage fight.
No.
It's not real.
Well, I want to know y'all's opinion on who would win. Let's say it happens 6 months from now.
Elon is a large man.
Yeah, I feel like he's bigger.
But no, Gracie. Remember, if you're into UFC, Gracie was a smaller man, and Gracie beat all these massive, muscular and not muscular, huge guys he fought.
Like if Mark is scrappier.
I think Mark is like a jiu-jitsu.
Like a grappler. He's just going to, yeah.
Well, apparently he's trained in MMA already.
Right.
Okay.
But I've heard that, who knows what that actually means?
I don't think Elon's trained him.
No, I don't think. Yeah, but there's some.
Yeah, but there's a difference. If I strike you, I'm trying to put myself in the.
Yeah.
If I strike you, but you can hold me, and then I can't strike, then I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg's also 12 years younger.
Yeah, it definitely.
So what do we mean by
I would
that?
say I would want Elon to win.
It helps in a fight.
Yeah. You would want Elon to win.
I would, but I think Zuckerberg would win just because of Gracie beat up all the big guys.
Yeah.
And he was victorious. And I think he's skilled in the same arts as
I would just
Gracie.
say my only caveat, I think it's an interesting debate because it does feel like more of an even match than you would think in that Elon is bigger.
50 pounds. He's got 50 pounds on him.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
So, wait,
but also, Elon is
crazy.
Crazy. Yeah, and you put a crazy person in a ring, and if they go crazy, I think he could do some damage.
I just think they're equally crazy.
That's fair. They're both pretty mentally.
But I think Elon may be less emotionally intelligent, and Mark may really have learned that skill young. Or
this whole conversation.
Yeah.
So
Elon is just less filtered, and so we get to see his craziness. But Mark probably has a hidden craziness in there.
So have either of them confirmed this though? That they are legit saying this? Because this reminds me. Do you remember the claymation celebrity deathmatch thing that used to happen? You guys are
on MTV.
You remember?
No, I was disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
You do.
I was
you
just
don't
agreeing
remember?
with you.
No, okay, so
you weren't born.
It was a thing. I don't think you were born.
I didn't want to make you feel bad, but
no, I just remember it, and this reminds me of that. I feel like it was kind of dumb back then, and this feels like a dumb thing.
Well, and Elon on Twitter, he's been posting images of him when he was on that yacht and it had his shirt off, and he looked like a ghost because he was so white. And he was really out of shape then. He keeps posting those pictures, the least flattering pictures, as that he's going to take Mark
as
out.
Evidence of.
But it's a lot of satire.
So he's engaging in it, but he may just be
he's
continuing the joke.
He was I was training, lifting up, I think, a beer or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, they're making money off the fact that they're even talking about it,
and we're talking about it.
Yeah, that we're talking about it. It works.
They're making no money off this, though.
That's not what we're spending a lot of time on. We are going to continue our recurring segment of a lightning round to get to know each other and you guys a little bit more.
Okay.
And so this is that idea. I listened to it last time and I was like, I broke the own rule of one word or whatever. But lightning round. So we want to blow through these questions, get the answer.
How many words?
I don't know, because some of these questions, I would say you get 10 seconds.
Less than 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
less than 7. So 6 words, maybe we would say. I don't know if that's okay to do or not, but okay. So here we go. We're gonna go clockwise here.
Okay.
Clockwise.
Yep.
And Jen, you're gonna start us off. When was your last speeding ticket?
I don't remember, but I've had one as an adult. But my most memorable one is as a teenager.
That's impressive. Okay, Jordan.
I don't think I've had any. I've gotten pulled over 2-3 times, but I don't think I ever got a ticket.
Talked your way out of it. All right.
New Mexico with my whole family on vacation.
Is that recent?
That was like 5 years ago.
Oh, okay, that's not bad.
The boys still talk about it. It was traumatic for them.
Really?
Yeah. Scare them.
My younger boys for sure.
That's good. That's good.
My older boys were never.
Yeah,
7 words.
I don't remember mine. I had 5 tickets from 16 to 18, and then I was good from there. So
5.
But it's all I can say. So let's move on.
Okay.
What was your first car?
Buick LeSabre.
Okay.
You don't even know what that is.
All right, Jordan, go ahead.
It was a seafoam green Nissan Altima.
I do remember it.
right.
I also remember when you wrecked it in a...
Blew it up in a Target parking lot.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Buck?
Honda CRX.
Nice. Dodge 1500, baby.
Oh, that is.
What, is that a truck?
Yeah, it's a truck.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
manly.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Manly.
Yeah, I kind of wish I still had it. What is your worst driving habit?
I hate to be honest. If I'm being honest, it's texting and driving.
Yeah.
I hate that though.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
You know that when there's like a really long line of traffic, like merging onto a highway or turning at a light or whatever,
Yep.
and then a guy like comes along and like cuts in at the last minute?
Yep.
I'm that guy.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh, that's the one thing that gets me.
My Honda Civic can fit anywhere. It's such a small
That's not
car.
the point. The point
I
is
don't even
everybody
slow
else
traffic.
waited.
No, I don't slow traffic down. It's amazing. You got to
No.
watch me do it. Seriously, I'll get in the car and watch it. I don't even like stop the flow of traffic. It's
Likability
amazing.
just...
Went way down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody that does it to me drives me crazy, but
Buck, what would you say?
I'm with Jen.
Yeah.
I don't pay attention. I just trust the Holy Spirit.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, it's not how
Okay.
that goes. It's not how
That
works.
is... golly, there's a lot of layers.
Just
there's layers.
clear up any theological confusion right now. It's not how that works.
There's going to be a lot of emails from this one.
Yeah.
For me, I would say that it's when I see a Toyota Tacoma, because I really like Tacomas, and I like want to look up like how much that model costs.
Yeah.
And then go like sadness, I'm just going to keep driving my car, which I'm
That's
very
also
grateful
a
for.
truck.
That is a truck. Yeah. Yeah. It's a truck.
That's the little one. The Tundra's the big one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But
But it's still a large truck.
I thought
Yeah.
the Tacoma was like the girl version of the Tundra.
whoa. Oh my gosh.
I thought that.
My heart.
Because I was like, honey, maybe I'll get a Tacoma.
I will say there's one in the
Sorry.
city. I gotta say that's burnt orange. It's got a 6-foot bed. It's got a camper on the back, and it's just like all souped up 4x4. I'm like, that would be the one.
Have you seen it multiple times?
Yes, God, if you could only. And then there's this like 25-year-old blonde chick driving it every time, and I'm just like
Yeah.
depressed
Yeah,
when I
sorry.
see it. So, anyways,
Sorry.
all right. As a kid, were you more of a rule follower or rule breaker?
Rule follower, but had to ask questions about all the rules. But would always follow.
Okay.
I think I was more of a rule follower.
Yeah.
Couple fights, couple like.
I mean, you're
lying to
valedictorian,
my
so-
parents
Yeah.
about where that.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I
nothing
actually
crazy.
just talked to your high school principal, and he would validate that. He talked about how you're a real follower.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love PJ.
Buck?
Rule breaker. Broke them all. Even my senior picture, they were like, everybody stare at the camera, and I got detention because I was like, nope.
I'm noticing a trend here.
I feel like that needs to be unpacked too.
Yeah. I would say, my brother was more of a rule breaker, so I think I watched that and became more of a rule follower, but turned into a little bit of a Pharisee in the process. So there's a lot to unpack there. Are you more street smart, common sense, or book smart, intelligence?
I don't like that question. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
She wants to be both.
I'm not good at like history or memorizing or dates or like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm good at retaining information that I enjoy. So like body keeps score, what happened to you, that kind of stuff. I just like tend to absorb.
Yeah.
And I think I have common sense, but I'm not.
Yeah,
like,
I would say
I
you're
would
definitely more book smart.
Didn't flinch.
Oh man.
That was so like.
You're so on the other side. You're intellectually like you have great intellectual
I think he meant it as a
capacity.
compliment.
Yeah, I don't know how to take
Like
that.
no, it's
But
like
man, we're talking to you about everyday normal.
All she heard is she has
Lord.
no comments.
zero street
don't-
smart over there.
Oh,
That's not
God,
what I was
okay.
saying. I just think you lean that way.
Jordan?
I have like an overinflated view of my common sense. My wife, my parents would be like book smarts, and it's not even
Yeah,
close.
Yeah.
I would have said book smart, but
Yeah. Buck, where are you at?
I would definitely say street smart.
Yeah.
because I can't even say.
Yeah, you
word.
helped me change the brakes on my car, and I would say street smarts. The way you went about that whole thing and your approach,
Yes.
yeah, it was very, very productive.
Yeah.
But a little terrifying at times too. Hoping the brakes would work. I would say I'm probably more book smart. I would say it's similar to Jordan. I thought I maybe had common sense, and then I married somebody with a lot of common sense and realized I have like very little common sense. So, Yeah, book smart. All right.
Okay, that was fun.
I like it.
Some of us are slightly offended, but we're going to
yeah.
move on.
We're like,
I'm going to reframe that. I'm going to put that in the rearview mirror and be like, that was for my growth.
Yeah.
There you go.
Lord, what he intended, you.
My pastor told me I have no common sense.
Can't wait to volunteer here
Oh,
more.
yes. You feel loved.
All right, y'all. So today's podcast is obviously about rules for the road. And we're doing this after all 4 parts have happened, and so we're going to be talking. We're going to try to ask a question per part, and we just got four good questions to talk through. And so, but the big premise of the series, I'll repeat it. We've been talking about it. Is direction, not intention, determines destination, and it's from Andy Stanley. And if you've been in the series for really any part, you'll have heard that at some point. And that's kind of the big idea. And so how do we as people align our direction with our intention to reach our desired destination in life as it relates to parenting, marriage, faith, finances, all these kind of things. And so we've been talking about, having other people, listening to the right voices, what it looks like to trust God with the road we're on, what it looks like to reframe the things in your rearview mirror, just all the different aspects of this. And so we're going to start with part 1, and I've got a question for you guys, and Buck, this might be a little bit more pointed towards you. Because it's talking about direction, not intention direction, not intention is most important. And one of the things you said is that satisfaction is better than fun. And so can you unpack that a little bit more? And then I've got a question for kind of all of us after that.
Yeah, it's just a short-term versus long-term is kind of the concept. It's like dopamine versus serotonin is kind of the concept. Hey, it's a rush. It's fun. Like, hey, I go buy these 5 or 6 things. Man, they're cool. They make my life better for the next, week, the next 2 weeks, the next, 3 weeks. But 5 years from now, they really, they were part of the direction that put me further in debt. And that long-term satisfaction of being financially free, or that long-term satisfaction of that health in a relationship is coming at the cost of that short-term excitement, like let's go have fun, let's make these crazy choices, let's go do these things, and then you put skeletons in your closet and they come out like long-term. And like dopamine is like that rush, it's fun, it's addictive, it's great, but serotonin is that long-term happiness and that long-term mood-altering chemical in our brains that goes, hey, I feel more purpose, I feel more alive, I feel more contentment, I feel more satisfaction. And I look back on the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and I go, I'm so satisfied. And that's really what I desire for people.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we were to take this, a super tangible example is like eating health, right? Like in the moment, it's far more fun to have the Oreo. And then, decades down the road, there's a satisfying thing of like, I built up a good habit of eating good and all that kind of stuff. We feel great. We're healthy, older, that kind of stuff. Right. So we all get that. That's the problem is not understanding that concept. The problem is like applying it in our life.
Yeah.
And so what would you guys say you do in your own lives that would be the things that kind of remind you to hone in on the things that are going to be satisfying later in life versus what's fun right now in the moment? How do you do that? Like just for you personally?
Well, this concept is a source of a lot of shame for me because I project it as soon as I go have a burger and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to get off the couch next week. I'm going to be so out of shape. And so it's like, it actually works against me a little bit because I think because I believe this concept. And so there's this thing in me where I'm like, that's the beginning of the end.
Yep.
Every time
Well, Rogan says the same thing, but from he has less shame about it, which may be healthier. But he's like, it's like, I want to feel good next week. Therefore, I'm going to eat the way I eat. And then he also says, but there are days I'm like, I'm just going to have fun. Yeah. My friends are in town, whatever. And I like that dynamic. Yeah. I think, that kind of thing, but.
Yeah. Cause one can land a little bit too legalistic.
Yeah.
And you're just not really just enjoying life. Right. Yeah. How would you answer it, Jen?
So many ways. I think for me, one of the questions I'm going to ask myself is, I'm going to pay for this either way, whatever it is, the not working out or the eating poorly or overspending or getting into it with Sal or being short fused with my kids. Or I'm going to pay. I can pay for it now, right? Or I can pay for it later. So if I'm willing to pay with patience, with discipline, with self control, it's paying now. So I have to pay now, so that I don't pay later. So I even remember our financial planner one time was like, "Hey, your health." And I was like, "Well, why are you talking to us about health? You're supposed to be managing our money." He's like, "Because you will pay later if you don't think of this now. So I will have more money to manage later if you're not giving it all to hospital bills and medical bills." Yeah. So that kind of concept, I think you can kind of plant over everything. It's like, do I want to, use wisdom, which costs me up front with restraint or whatever, but I get a huge payout later, or do I want to use consequence and have to kind of pay all that on the backside? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of a framework I use.
Sure. It reminds me a lot. I think I first heard this with Buck in premarital counseling, actually, like years ago. But the idea of pain of pain of discipline versus pain of regret. Like they're both painful.
Yep.
But you're either going to have the pain of being disciplined, or you're going to face the pain of regret later on.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a practical way too for me, if I'm understanding all this right, is just inviting feedback in my life. Like it's the practical piece is every week I have relationships where I'm either asking, like we have a thing here culturally we call open time, and every one-on-one I say, what like there are things I cannot see about me. What are things that you're seeing that perhaps I'm creating a gap, I'm creating a trust gap, I'm not empowering you as the director of this area, or the way I'm running meetings, or organizationally, whatever it is. So there's that feedback mechanism, but also just on a personal, like relational, like people that, who know me the very most. Like I ask, hey, it's been a couple weeks, we're working on this. What are you seeing in my life? Like, what are you seeing in my marriage? Because they're around my marriage. What are you seeing in my parenting? Or I invite that in. I'm like, hey. And so it's a lot of those like, hey, like I'm seeing, like you may be saying this with Jill, and it's short term, it makes sense, but have you thought of the what that's going to do? Hey, you keep saying this to your boys, and I get it makes sense. You're frustrated with them, but have you thought about where that's going to lead, like relationally when they're 18, 25, 35? Lately, like the big thing that I've been working on is not only from a feedback perspective, but also from journaling. And journaling, like every morning I'm looking at the things I feel like God is teaching me, and it's patience. Like I'm trying to figure out why I have there's a lack of patience to where if the boys are working on the boat with me, it's not as enjoyable for them, because I want it done quickly. I want it done the way I want it done. I want it done efficiently. And I'm like, what is that? And that short-term wise, it's great for me. Like, hey, we're efficient. We get the job done in a fast way. But my boys are even giving me feedback. And like Jonathan the other day said that I was like, hey, can we work on the boat this afternoon? And he's like, Dad, if you're patient, I'll work on the boat with you. And I would love that he was willing to tell me that, because the short-term satisfaction for me was great. Like, hey, we're getting it done. But 5 years down the road, he's like, I don't really want to hang out with you because you're not that patient. So it's coming at a cost relationally down the road. So I just think those feedback loops in my life, and then being intentional, like journaling, keeping those front and center. Like, God, what do you want me to hear? Or a couple guys I meet with, like, what are you seeing?
Yeah. I will say those feedback loops can be painful though. Because I was mentioned, like painful in like a good way, like dang it, like I told Buck recently, like I just got in this craze, and I mentioned earlier, like I just want to go buy a truck, like I want to buy a Tacoma. Yeah, I'll
go with you.
What's amazing is Ashley was finally like, Ashley doesn't see different cars, she sees colors of cars, and so, and I could be like, identify the headlights of a Tacoma in the middle of the night, like I know what year that is. Like I've just
is that a male thing?
Maybe, I don't know.
I know lots of guys that can do that. They can see headlights and tell what the car is. That blows my mind.
Maybe it is. I don't know. But anyways, so I just felt this thing in me rising, and I was like, oh, this is not wise financially. And this, I'm not saying I get this right often, but I told 2 people in my life, like, hey, if I show up with a truck, like you guys know that I made a really bad financial decision, and you're going to call me out on it. And they were like, okay. And then it sucks now, because I tell Ashley, like, hey, like in terms of making the bad financial decision, like we could make a bad decision and go get a truck probably, like pre-approval and loans and all that stuff, but it would not be wise for us to do that. And so like, I just think it's painful though, because I see the burnt orange one being driven around by the lady, and I'm like, oh.
25-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Well, I even think, inviting God into that situation as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that can sound a little bit like mysterious, but I mean, just he's for you, and he'll tell you. It's pretty clear oftentimes, like God, like the Tacoma.
Yeah.
And his voice.
He's using that as an example.
You may try to silence it, or like, and then like reinterpret, he just wants me to be happy, so I'm just going to go buy. Like, but
Yeah,
I think it's the more people I meet with, the later, the more life experience I have.
Yeah.
The stories I'm hearing is whatever decisions we made for the short-term gain that caused the pain of long-term regret, they knew.
Yep.
They knew. Like in a deep part of their soul, they knew.
Yeah.
And so I think there are times we know, and especially if you're willing to invite, like, God, is this a wise financial decision?
Yeah.
God, why is it that I struggle with food, and food is so important to me, and it's causing, like, I'm not going to have the energy for my kids or in retirement or whatever.
Right.
Whatever that is, it's like, God, what is that? And that's a really great practical feedback mechanism.
Yeah.
Think about the measure what matters concept too. Like when you think about direction, actually, like, am I on the direction I think I am? Like, if you tracking the things that are most important, in some way, shape, or form. Like for me, like gamifying things, progress. Apparently, that works for about half the population, so half the listeners like will enjoy that and have fun with that. But
yeah, it doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
I'm like, I guess I'm gonna lose today.
Like a habit tracker kind of thing you're talking about?
I mean, I track my reading, I track my miles, I track like meetings with people. Like, am I actually meeting with these relationships? So on. I have like on Fridays, it's basically this meeting with myself that I do on Fridays, and I like just look at the things from the past week.
Won, essentially.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I don't know if it's like a win-loss as much, but like it's like, did I do these things? And we typically are pretty bad at like remembering, like projecting our past of like how did I eat, or how much did I work out, or have I been intentional with these relationships, and time can go real fast when you're busy and so on. So some way that's like just objectively, I mean, budgeting is usually like an awesome exercise in that. Like you had no idea how much you spent on fast food or alcohol or whatever it is. Like we would way underestimate that, and then it's like, well, I just actually looked at it and it's pretty black and white now, and it's like I did or I didn't show up to the gym, like I did, those kinds of things. So
getting someone I think objective in any of those areas, I know is like getting a financial, if it's finances, right? Like having someone look at your money that has no emotional attachment to it. It's like, no, because money only works one way. You either have to make more or spend less. Like that's the only way you're going to end up with more. Like that's how that works. It's math. It's not personal, but like it feels so personal. Same thing with food. You have to burn more calories than you take in if you want to lose weight. Like this is not like a thing. I don't think, of course, I'm not speaking from expertise, but like at the same time, like I think we get in these habits where you aren't willing to say like, I'm going to hand this over to someone else for a second. Like keep a food journal, let someone else look. I did that for a while. Someone was like, you haven't had vegetables in 3 days. And I'm like, I so did. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't. Because I will trick myself every time. And if I can also remove excuses or like structure my day in a way, if I know I won't work out in the evening, then stop acting like I will. Like just stop tricking yourself. Like you're doing it. Like to your point. Like just slow down enough, even like 3 seconds of a slow down to say, I'm not gonna pretend like this isn't what's actually happening anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you've kind of numbered your days, you figured out where your priorities are, and then you have like I love what Jordan said. You have like a weekly review just to like zoom out of your life and look down on like, how am I doing in all these things that I've said are my priorities? Have I prioritized these things? And the more I just think in the day to day, like we're just in the weeds, and it's so hard to get yourself out of there. And
well, if you're an organizational leader or leader, in any business that you want to be successful, I mean, you do this every week, anyways.
Yeah.
You look at your metrics, you look at your KPIs. You look at all these different things, and you're held accountable. I mean, depending on your role in the organization, but you're doing it because you want your organization, your department to be successful. So, if you want your life to be successful, why not keep similar kind of practices? I mean, they have to be reasonable and personable and relational and all that, or relational and all that kind of stuff. But
spiritual, inviting God into it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah. Go ahead. Why not?
Yeah.
Why don't you throw God in? That's good.
This is great. Going on to part 2 of the series. So Buck talked about identifying the voice. This was towards the end of the message, and it was really about who and what you listen to is going to determine what you do. Is that right? Is that how we phrase that? And part of that is we have 5 voices that we listen to in our lives, and God, Satan, word, flesh, and soul. And we've done more extensive messages on these in the past, and canceling out the ones that are untruths and tuning into the things that are true. So, Buck, I just wanted to ask, can you give a quick just review of those 5 voices, and then I have a follow-up question for that too.
Yeah, it's the voice of God, and that's to discern that voice, it'd be like the scriptures and what does God say throughout the scriptures. That's the best kind of discerning. And then you have the voice of Satan, and as I said on Sunday, we just go with what Jesus said Jesus said Satan's real, he's literal, he's active, he's trying to outwit us, he works in our mind, it works in our emotions. That's where he's trying to trick us all the time and deceive us. And his voice is, he's an accuser, he's a liar, he's a deceiver, so, again, the scriptures are really good to kind of go to counteract what would God say, what would Satan say. And then the voice of the world is the third voice, and that's just whatever culture. I mean, you could be born 50 years ago, culture was saying something. You could be born 50 years from now, culture's going to tell you truth. And are you going to listen to that truth? And then the voice of your flesh is very much like your temptations, your coping mechanisms, or even the voice of, like, as I said on Sunday, like your parents, or the voice of that bully, or the voice of whatever, that flesh that keeps saying, hey, work harder, you're not enough, you're not beautiful enough, you're not handsome enough, you're not a man, you're not a woman, whatever it is, it's going to say, like, we heard all those voices growing up, and you're just kind of like, man, I feel inadequate. So that's the voice of your flesh, and then last of all, the voice of your soul, and that's just who God made you to be. Not who your dad tells you to be, who your mom tells you to be, who culture tells you to be, whoever. It's who did God design you to be. And there's something that is uniquely on you that, man, when you live in light of that, that's very meaningful and purposeful.
Yeah. That last one's like identity, right? Like it's kind of in that lane.
Yeah, identity and occupation and just all those kind of things.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that. That's helpful. So one of the questions for all of us is, do you guys have like ways in which you identify the voice and remind yourself of what is true? Like, how do you identify the true voices? How do you make sure, is that God's voice or is that the burrito I ate yesterday? Is like the funny example. But I think we do that all the time. Like, even, does God want me to buy the truck or not buy the truck? It's like those kind of things.
The truck.
Yeah. Buy the truck. No, I don't think he's saying that. But how do you guys do that? How do you identify what voice you're hearing?
I literally have Jeremy told us to jump in fast. I literally have, of the 4 questions in my journal prompt each day, like one of them is, what untrue thought can I replace with truth? And to me, like, it's daily. Like, there is some untrue, like, thought, emotion, critical about myself, about somebody. Like, it's honestly kind of wild, like, that I never really get to skip that question. So it's, to me, like, brings front and center something that's been taking energy, something I've been stressed about, afraid of, angry about, whatever it is. So
it's interesting, because when you first said that, I thought you ask that of yourself every day, and then you're like, it's actually odd how daily that question would come up. So that's a cool thought, because in my head I'm like, I wouldn't have something to say every day, but no, okay, so maybe I would have a good.
You and Jesus wouldn't have anything to say.
No.
I love that.
That particular question was like, what lie am I going to replace? But when you said, because you kind of said, like, what's taking up energy? For me, I was like, what's occupying mental real estate? Like, what? Like, looking at that, where is bitterness? Where maybe where's some judgment?
Yeah.
Like, when they all get lumped into that question, I'm like, I'd have something daily then.
Yeah.
But I think that it helped me to stop judging my feelings or thoughts, like being angry and like trying to like basically stop them from floating through. So don't give a lot of judgment or weight to them, let them be, but then submit them, right? This is the taking the thoughts captive. Or one of my favorite parables with Jesus is when he teaches about the weeds growing up with the wheat, and that we have a tendency to just want to like strike it all. And so I think I try and sit down every day in the morning in a journaling format, like, where I'm like trying to sift through the weeds and the wheat, because I don't want to miss what God might want, but I have a tendency to want all the negative to go away. Well, if I'm angry at Buck for saying that I have no common sense, like I just want to get that away. It's like, well, no, okay, I'm angry. I'm not really. It's an easy example, but like I'm not angry at Buck. Like, but why is that feeling there? And so just like sorting and sifting with it, rather than, because I think and to Buck's point earlier, we kind of know. I think if we slow down enough, we kind of can feel it and sense it, and that's the Holy Spirit talking to us. I think the bigger issue is we just want to leverage, let another voice leverage influence, and we kind of silence the others because anger or bitterness or something feels more comfortable. But so I think that for me, practically every morning, really doing that sorting and sifting process, not being mad at myself for having a particular emotion, or like, it's okay that you got angry. But like, what are we going to do in that anger? So, because I think sometimes we, again, start a process of like, well, I just got to stop thinking all the bad things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, I think the trend here too, and I would add like my own version of that would be I've shared this before. It's like my counselor called it flipping the script, whereas most of the times we go, I know this, but I feel this way. And we cancel out the truth with a lie, and like journaling what I'm feeling, but then saying, but I know this.
Yeah,
so
I love that.
I feel, like I'm failing as a father, but I know that like, God's big enough and he can handle these things, and I can, so it's just flipping the script for me is my version of that too. I want to come back to that because I'm hearing, I know Buck has some form of journaling. I know you do, and I do. So I want to like circle back around in just a second. But the common thread I'm hearing is that in order to sift through the voices we hear in our life, you have to have an intentional practice that gives you the space and time to do that. Right?
Yeah, or
I think so.
the intentional relationship, I would say.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
both.
It's
Both.
like if I'm unwilling to ask you, hey, in a parenting thing or in a leadership thing, hey, I'm about to lead Northpoint this way, or hey, with Jill, or financially, or even morally, hey, we're going to go to Vegas, and here's what we're going to, that whatever it is. If there's that kind of check and balance, that filtering mechanism of a common valued relationship, where somebody has enough security not to give you flattery, but to give you truth and look at you and say like, hey, I get why you feel that way, Jeremy, but here's the truth. Here's what your Heavenly Father said. It's just such a really clear filter. And you got to be careful because you're always inviting that person's unhealth into that voice. So you actually could be inviting the kind of the fleshly voice into that. But again, typically if you have that kind of relationship, that you form that trust, that they have their best interest in mind, that when you don't have your best interest in mind, they're going to go ahead and reflect that to you. That's one of the greatest discerning things to help you discern whose voice that is.
Yeah.
And my counselor, and I've shared this a million times, but just said, would ask me constantly. And then I ask myself this, like, whose voice is that?
Yeah.
And just answering that question is like, it forces you down this exercise to go like, I'm going to get to the bottom of like who this voice is that says there's no hope because of what I've done as a parent. There's no hope in this relationship. Whose voice is telling me that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
That's great. I think a similar question I've framed up in my mind before is, I thought a lot of times it's not super clear. Like when we're, sometimes you can look exactly at scriptures and it says, do this, don't do this. But it's like, do I take this job? Do I not take this job? Do we move or not move? Like those kind of things. How do I hear God's voice? And one of the most helpful pieces I've ever heard is like, out of the 2 options or the 3 options or whatever, what does the fruit look like in each of these scenarios? And because, it's pretty clear about, fruits of the Spirit, what would come from God, what would be, fruit that is created in our lives as a result of like staying in tune with the vine, staying in tune with God. And it's in Galatians, love, peace, patience, that whole list. And one is going to have a lot of that, or one's not going to have a lot of that. And you can usually, if you're honest enough, or sitting across from a relationship who's going to be honest with you, you can identify like, for me, it was so eye-opening to go like, if I go this way, it's going to have all of this stuff with it. That's not the fruits of the Spirit. This way is where like the fruits of the Spirit is. And that was really helpful for me to figure out how to hear God's voice in my life. Do you guys have any just like quick hacks about if someone's sitting across from you for coffee and they're like, how do you hear God's voice in your life? How would you answer that? I guess I would say, how would you answer that? And not to minimize, but also, is there anything other than like just intentional time with God every single day? Because that's obviously 90% of it, right? But how would you guys answer like a thing you do or a frame of reference or anything like that?
I've been outside of like journaling or intentional time. I talk with my mentor every week, and she actually was just texting me. She's like, "When are we talking today?" So like I get that honest reflection. I do think I'm trying to think of something more like tangible, but reading my words back to me or saying my words back to me. I don't know if that makes any sense. So like I've been in this habit. I think we've talked about it on a podcast of when someone sends me a text with a situation they're dealing with, they're trying to sort through and understand, should I go this way or that way, take this job or that job, or have this conversation in this relationship. I'm like, well, tell me what you're thinking and feeling. And when they do, I usually get a response that's fairly actually usually well-rounded. Like it's like, I got a little bit of this, but I got a little bit of this. And if I'm honest, but I believe in this person, but I'm kind of having this tension. And so I've been doing this thing. It's probably not going to make people not want to talk to me anymore. But like I've just copied and pasted that text and like tweaked it just a little to reflect their own, because they've already got it inside them. I'm like, and you're saying really great things. And so it's funny to watch. Like I'll send it back and they'll be like, oh, those are just That's great. You're so good with words. I'm like, they're your words. But what happens is, because when you're sharing with someone else, it's just being genuine. It's just usually, I mean, not all the time, I get it, but like you're usually, when you're coming for advice. So I've been trying to do that with myself, if that makes sense, like flipping my own things and being like, okay, so what am I actually saying here? And that kind of thing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, it's like many times I've asked Buck a question and he's like, well, what would you say about it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just asked you the question. And he's like, well, what do you think about it?
Yeah.
It's like, dang it.
Yeah. I also, I mean, to your, you alluded to it, but I don't think there's anything that can fully replace no, I wouldn't even phrase it this way. The Bible is just, I mean, it's the lamp to our feet. It is, the God breathed. In other words, it's relational. It's for you. It's for your benefit. It's, I love you as a father, so I've given you this. It's clarity. And that's one of the greatest gifts a father can give their children, is clarity. And God, and so I think sometimes when it comes to the Bible, there's a lot of pushback. And, I didn't say this when I was talking about this on stage, but I think there are great resources like Amy Orr Ewing wrote the book, Why Can We Trust the Bible? And she gave her dissertation at Oxford on this and had to give it verbally as why there's no other works of antiquity, nothing that compares to the New Testament documents. And she got an A. And half the professors who were on the other side of her were not followers of Jesus. And so there's no other work of antiquity you can trust than like that you could trust the New Testament documents. Yeah. And then I think Dan Kimball's got a great book that we have a small group around that's How Not to Read the Bible, that deals with a lot of different questions about the Bible. So I just think it is such a wonderful, it's blessed my life. It's blessed so many lives. It's given us so much clarity to the voice. So it's like, it really is going to the scriptures in those nuances. And it's inviting God into those moments and going like, God, like this job could be beneficial. But then maybe you read a passage in the Old Testament about why the Israelites spent 40 years in the desert, and it had nothing to do with an efficiency, or they didn't know their way. It had everything to do with the formation of their heart. They weren't ready to receive the promised land. Their hearts, it would have corrupted them even more than it did, all the blessings they received from that. So then the job question goes, I could take that job, make a lot more money, have a lot more, prestige and title in the corner office. I'm just not ready for that. Yeah. And that all came from the scriptures, and all came from just, being willing to be open to go, God, what do you have for me this morning? What do you have for me today? So I would just lean hard on the scriptures, and then always that validating voice. It's, it's that, like in the Old Testament, it talked about prophets would have this thing from God. God gave me this. Okay. Well, go ahead and tell the community, and if you're wrong, we actually kill you. And so it's like,
that's a good way to know it or not. Yeah.
Are you willing to tell the community the voice that's in your head that's telling you to move forward with this? And if you are, then that's just a sign. A community that's willing to tell you something you don't want to hear, that's a sign that you're really wanting to hear the voice of truth.
Yeah. It made me think of the prophet Jeremiah when he said the heart is deceitful beyond all measure.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's such a big part of this conversation too, of how easily we can deceive ourselves. And I always joke about the Bachelor or the Bachelorette show, and how just the main thing is, I just got to follow my heart.
Right.
And it's like, that's potentially the worst piece of advice you could ever give yourself.
And it's so for your benefit. I mean, these practices and these things and it's never fun to hear what it's like on the other side of me, but it's one of the greatest gifts for my marriage. It's one of the greatest gifts for my personal meaning and purpose and happiness. I am a happier man today than I was a year ago, 5 years ago, because of the act, because of that discipline. And that's why, like, on Sundays I say so often, like, God is not against you. He's not trying to oppress you so you can't go liberate yourself and experience all these amazing freedoms. It's actually quite the opposite. He's saying, here's the voice of truth, because I want you to go liberate yourself and experience these amazing freedoms. So it's, it's so difficult to give yourself that gift. But if you're willing to give yourself the gift of, through the scriptures, through others, feedback, through journaling, through, reflecting your own words. I just think it's such a valuable gift.
Yeah. Well, a big component of it, and this was part 3 of the series, is trusting God, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And one of the things you shared is that Brennan Manning quote from his book, Ruthless Trust. And it's that I don't need any more insights into faith. I just need to trust what I've already received. that is such a hard thing to like come to terms with, and it's so anti-Christian culture because we just want to come in and consume this next book or this next sermon or this next thing, and it's like, at the end of the day, you just gotta like allow whatever truth you already know. God loves you. That simple idea to make its way down from your head to your heart, and that journey is very difficult. Why do you think it's so hard to recognize what we've already received and to trust God with like everything?
You're supposed to jump in fast, Jordan.
It sounds like you just did.
No, okay. I think especially younger for me, and it's funny because I just had lunch with a student yesterday that's going to get baptized at Camp 75, and they had a list of questions for me. And so they were like, I want to go to lunch and ask you 5 questions about faith. And I was like, this is going to be interesting.
That's awesome.
Question number 1 was, what's my favorite color? So I was like, yes.
4 to go.
But one of them was like, how do I know I am fully trusting God? Mm-hmm. And it was just a great conversation to have. But one of the things I noticed is like, so tell me why you feel like you're not. Like, where's some, and it's questions. Like, they feel like questions equal not trust. And so I think setting us free to understand, like, no, I mean, we would never do that with our children. I mean, I know we do get annoyed with like the why phase, like why, but like ultimately we want to have enough space and patience to be able to be, to be able to receive all that and to hear it and to walk through it. And I think God is kind of an exemplar of a perfect parent, is a different dynamic, right? So God is not afraid of our questions. I love how Jesus interacts with Thomas, like, help me even in my unbelief. So like I have this trust, this foundation, but I still get to ask all these questions. So that was one of the first things I thought of, is like, sometimes we think we don't trust. We actually trust more than we do. We think because we feel guilty maybe for questions or getting all those intellectual boxes checked.
Yeah. We pray for clarity versus like just help being courageous when we don't have clarity.
Yeah. Yep. That's one of my thoughts. Your turn, Jordan.
I really didn't volunteer anything, so I don't know.
We're all looking at you, Jordan.
To me.
You must have something.
I don't have a hard time trusting God, Jen. So I just don't,
Wow.
Goodness. But he does when he drives and cuts everybody off.
Why can't you trust him to get you there on time? You just follow it,
Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
In the book Ruthless Trust, where that quote comes from, Insights into Faith, you just need to trust what you've already received. In the beginning, he says, like, that's like chapter 1 is that idea. Mm-hmm. Chapter 2 is about gratitude. And in a quote, he says, the foremost quality of a trusting disciple is gratefulness. Mm-hmm. Why would you guys say that is the foremost quality of a trusting disciple, even though I don't know if you've read that book or not, but
I feel like being in, like, serving alongside you, I feel like I've read all his books.
Oh, that's good.
He gets quoted often.
Yeah.
John Mark Comer and him, and I'm like, okay, I've read them all.
And Andy Stanley.
Yes.
Andy Stanley.
Yep.
Yeah, those would be 3 big influences.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think, like, why is gratitude, why is gratefulness, this posture, a part of trusting God?
I think it's like a pathway to humility, and humility is like the door to trust, our Heavenly Father. Because it's like when I look around and I'm like, look at what God's given me. Like, I am so grateful for my marriage. I'm so grateful for this house I live in. I'm so grateful for the car I drive. I'm so grateful for the boat that caught on fire. I'm so grateful for, the friendships. And I'm so grateful I get to walk in this place with an AC and 4 walls. I'm so grateful for the amazing people God has brought to Northpoint. I'm so grateful for their trust and willingness to invest in our vision and mission and trust God with our finances. Like, all of a sudden it's like, well,
you got a lot.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm wide open now. Mm-hmm. Like, so God, you want me to go apologize to Jill? I don't want to, but I trust you because look at what you've done. And this is who you are. And so it helps with, I think it's like the road. It's the pathway. It's the priming the pump to go, I can trust you with every aspect of my life. But oftentimes when I'm not grateful, it'd be the opposite. I'm like, well, I don't have this in my marriage, but I see what Jen has. I don't have this in my house, but I see what Jeremy has. I don't see, it's like, God, I don't even know if you love me, so how could I trust you? I don't even know if you're for me, so how could I trust you? And it's just hadn't taken the time to be grateful.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you connect the dots from like sin, and like I've heard one of my mentors has said that the root of all sin is pride. Mm-hmm. So if sin is the antithesis of God, then pride is the antithesis of God. Therefore, humility would be like putting yourself in a posture to be doing life with God on a more regular basis. Mm-hmm.
And I've heard the definition of humility given once as just as right standing. So it's not like necessarily like lower or higher, right? It's just right standing. And I think that gratitude gives you right standing. Like it gives you proper perspective. Mm-hmm. It's like, yes, there are things that could be better, or yes, I am working on things, or I do need to work in that area. But like all this over here and especially in our culture, like we are far more cared for than, I think. And when you explore other cultures, right, like in other countries where they have way less and their gratitude is still like overflows. But they just have the right perspective. And I think gratitude helps you get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and back to your original question too, I do think, this leads to the original sin, is like, I want more information. You told me not to eat from the tree, I need more information. So clarity is there. Clarity is not the issue. It's now submission, it's now trust, it's now humility. And so it would be the opposite of that, is like, we already have information and what's going to lead to what God desires for you in your marriage, or what God desires for you with your kids, or financially, or for your personal health or spiritual health, whatever it is. And oftentimes we're just on this kind of it's this very primal. It's like this train with all the generations and generations and generations of momentum that now smashes into my life, and I want more information instead of like, And so I think that's part of it, which is pride. Pride is I know better. So like, I'm going to figure this out, that kind of thing. So I think, there's certainly a combination of things as to why we constantly want more information. And I also think there's a practical piece. I think sometimes you do need more information.
Sure.
I think that's a very, like you said, hey, there's the wheat and the wheat and the weeds. And so there is like a place you do need more information. It's not like a quest to go, I need more information. It's bad. It may be a very practical thing to go, I want to understand that more. I'm curious about that. Because I really do want to trust God. And I think he's trustworthy. I just don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
I think I am like plagued by this like all or nothing thinking, and it's it's as much as I know it, it's still like this elusive. There'll be someday like I'm fixed, and it just will be easy. And I think it's designed such that I think this was your sermon a couple like months ago. The daily, like the most important word, and then you just have to like pick up your cross daily. And so there's like this daily surrender, and that is where like relationship exists with Jesus. Like that's where trust is, or the fabric of relationship is in that trust. So I think it's so easy for me, and that's like sin. It's what it's ultimately like I'm a sinner. So it's like it's that trying to like feel like I would actually get to this point where I don't need God anymore, because I can now do all the things and control all the things, as opposed to like, every single morning, this is a conscious choice, like to surrender today to him. And so I think that's part of what makes it hard for me, is I want to do a one-time stop as opposed to like every single day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting that Jesus put that word in there.
Yeah.
Take up your cross. He could have finished the sentence, but he added daily in there, and it's a pretty powerful word.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is all great, guys. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and all of those things.
Yeah. Watch out.
Moving on to the last part, part 4, we talked about reframing what's in our rearview mirror. Oftentimes what takes us off the road that we're on is not having enough information, but we got to look back and deal with something that has maybe kept us swerving or kept us stopped or something like that. And so we talked about acknowledging, processing, and reframing what's in our rearview mirror. And I think for a lot of people, they can get to acknowledging sometimes, but processing is a really difficult process. It's a difficult journey. Why do you guys think that is? And, how would you unpack what it looks like just to process the things that are in our rearview mirror?
That's a big question.
Yeah. It's just being alone. I think the most difficult thing for me to process is when I think I have to process it myself. I've got to figure this out. I'll work it out. I'll work hard enough. I'll read enough books. I'll figure it out. And so much of processing is sitting across from like you or sitting across from Jen and just going like, you're asking questions. You're unpacking. You're saying, so as a result of that, now like, so it's hard for you to share emotion. Yeah, it's hard for me to share emotion. Now, where does that come from? Well, I don't know. When's the last time you felt like you could be vulnerable and share emotion? And so it's like just unpacking that more and more. And then it's like you're processing that all the way back to the origin of why it is you struggle with what you struggle with. But you're not going to do that. Like you're in the midst of it. You're in the pain of it. You're in the hurt of it. You're in the confusion of it. And so I think what makes it difficult sometimes is like, I don't know what to do. That's just the way I am. It's kind of like the way we process.
Yeah.
It's like, I just read this book. I've done that before. I'm fine. But if you have a spiritual director, somebody, a mentor, a counselor, somebody who's seen perhaps more life or been trained in that area, or emotionally neutral, they can reflect things to you to go like, I had no idea that was going on in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I just didn't see that.
Yeah.
And I think that's helpful, just relationships.
And I'll let you answer. I just want to acknowledge the screaming in the background so that the podcast listeners aren't like,
No, it's our
what
fans.
was that? Yeah,
It was
no.
like-
Yeah.
There's
It's
a,
the audience.
excited.
It's the
Crowd
studio
applause.
audience. Calm
yes,
down.
there is a kids program happening in the room next to us. So just know that it's not like people. Yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, as you were sharing, Buck, I was thinking of even the point you made about, the quest for knowledge is like so a part of the original struggle that we have in our separation of God, but part of that is also isolation, right? Like, I mean, that's such a great tactic. If I can make you think you can or need to deal with it, or no one else can help you deal with it, or you are too much or not enough, if I can do or you don't have enough, or, whatever whatever I can do to separate you, that is when I ultimately can kind of win if I'm an enemy, right? Like, so I just think that isolation is a big part of, if you insist on reviewing your rearview mirror in isolation, you won't get I don't know that you'll get very far. I mean, you can do some great work just on your own. And I do think you can go too opposite, right? Leaning, like, never being still with yourself. Like, I think you can go too far the extreme in terms of like rallying people around you. But I do think isolation is a big component on if you make sure you're not doing any of this in isolation.
Yeah. Well, most often I find that, like, if I go, I'm working on something and I talk to Buck or I talk to a counselor about it, it's like, the charge is generally go do this work by yourself now. It's like I'm able to hear something reflected and now. So it feels like it's both. It's like you got to be on the other side of people, and then you got to be alone, and you got to do like the heart searching and that kind of stuff. And it's got to be both, but just one or the other by themselves don't necessarily help you acknowledge and process.
Well, it's just like forgiveness. I think it's the idea to go, hey, something in my rearview mirror, like my dad, my ex-wife, my mom, or whatever, so much pain. And this is my view on women. This is my view on life. This is my view on men, whatever it may be that you're wrestling with, and you know it. But then you read in the Bible, or you think to yourself, or you hear the preacher say, just forgive. The Lord's forgiven you, forgive. But then you can sit down with somebody who can reflect to you and say, have you ever thought about forgiveness as a process? Have you taken the time, to your point, have you written the letters that you're not going to send to anyone, that you just share with me, that like, what exactly did they do? That's the first step of forgiveness. And write 2 or 3 letters, unfiltered. Then what do you struggle with as a result? You're like, what do you mean, what do I struggle with? Well, you're struggling. Like, if you're going to work through forgiveness and really process it, you need to write 3 or 4 or 5 letters, and that could take a couple months to go, what do you struggle with as a result of what they've done? And then what do you think that they owe you? Write some more letters. Now you got to go, by yourself and write those letters and process those thoughts in that emotionally dark room, and it feels like, no, there's just no way, but that person's helping you. And then ultimately you have to answer the 4th part of forgiveness is, what are you going to do with what they owe you? Because you can't be 10 again when they did that to you. There's no rewind button in life.
You can't undo it.
You can't undo it. So what are you going to do with what's in the rearview mirror? So having somebody, like for me, for 35 years, I thought forgiveness was just emotionally, like, just, okay, fine, you don't owe me anything. But like, I never processed it. And it required somebody on the other side of me to help me work through that information, to give me some new information, and then say, go do these steps in isolation, meaning God's with you, but it's like you're working that. And man, that was liberating. That was really freeing. And that took, forgiveness can take months, it can take weeks, it can take years, depending on the offense that was committed. And that, having somebody on the other side of you to walk you through that process is instrumental in processing what you see in your rearview mirror.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other reason I think what you guys just described can't be done in isolation, like, is actually impossible, is the part that I talked about at the retreat a few years ago that was so, like, big for Em and I, was like this, there's a comfort to, like, all of your past, like, healing and so on that can't happen in isolation. So I used to try to do this whole process, like, just in my head, like, if I just had the right info and can connect the right dots, like, I could fix it all, which is another form of just going and doing it all on your own and being your own God and being in control. Whereas, like, there are certain things, whether you were the offended or the offender, and whatever part of your story you're thinking of, like, there's now, like, this wound there that needs to be, like, comforted, seen, healed, and that's both, like, by God, and he uses, like, others to do that as well. And that to me was like a big epiphany. I did always think I just needed one more book, or whatever it might be. And that really can't happen on our own. Like, somebody has to meet us in that. Like, God has to use somebody to heal those parts of us. So
Yeah, something, because I was thinking about this when we were, the last question, like from week 3, just about how we can process surrender, or how we can reframe. And And so not being raised in church, when I stepped into my first church, it was Methodist, so it had a lot of liturgy and had a lot of rituals and tradition. And it took me a minute to adjust. I kind of thought that was like old school, a little archaic, like, what's its validity now, that kind of thing. As I have gotten older, I have recognized, I don't know, there's something about ritual and processing, rites of passage, these things that actually do help us reframe and process, right? So, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to, go to a Catholic Mass every day, or, I understand that that's not going to be for everybody at every point, but sometimes when I'm sitting across from someone, I'm like, we just need to have a funeral for this thing. Like, you have not really laid this down, and we need to, and there's a part of me that feels like I want to somehow find a way to tangibly get you to physically, because we're body, mind, and soul, right? So, and it's so connected.
Yep.
And so if our body is having a hard time processing, can I physically take, like if I've got something from my past, is it possible? Writing the letters, that's a physical work, right? Like things I can't do in isolation. I do if someone, maybe I need to be held. Maybe I need to help someone have a conversation with that younger self, the things that I would like to say. But there are practices and processes that are actually a little more physical, and I think that they help us release, they help us reframe, and it would be different for everyone. And I think you can go too crazy with that to an extent, but like I do think we undersell that. Like, hey, maybe we do need to go on a hike, and when we get to the top of that mountain, we truly release that thing.
Yeah. Well, that was where, a place that I had felt stuck, and Buck and I have talked about this a lot, and I think we've done a podcast on this before too, but the difference between decisional forgiveness and emotional forgiveness, it was like I wrote the letters, I did it all, and I still I feel this way, and I can't get over it. And then I had to be walked through a process of emotional forgiveness, which is really just a process of reframing. And it was this book called Forgiving and Reconciling by Everett Worthington. And he goes through these 5 steps, and the 4th step is to commit to publicly forgive, which is where you create a symbol of this. Yeah. And this is my dramatic mountain story, but it was reading this book, going through these processes in the mountains in Colorado. And so we were going on this hike the next day. So I put like a rock in my backpack and carried it to the top of the mountain, and then put it there and took a picture of it. And it was like it was like my stone that I'm putting down from the story of Jesus and the woman caught in adultery. It's like I can't throw it either. And so it was me putting that down, and it was an amazing experience. It was Gray's Peak. We named Grayson after that mountain and stuff. And so it was
that's a real big experience.
Yeah, and there was a number of other things, like Ashley's hips and knees gave out at the top, and there was a whole thing going down the mountain and stuff.
Lack of oxygen.
Yeah, but it was. I would look back on that and go like, that was the moment when it sunk in for me. I had to reframe that drastically, that tangibly, to your point, for that to really help change some of the neural pathways in my brain.
Yeah, I love the idea of some visual stuff. One of my favorite passages is where the women are coming after the resurrection. They're coming and looking for Jesus, and someone says, "Why do you look for the living among the dead?" And so in my head, I ask myself, is this a tombstone? And it just needs to be. But why am I looking for the living among the dead? And so trying to find something that visualizes. So I have this empty tomb thing in my office that just is that's where my eyes need to be focused. So I think finding those things, pieces of art, moments in nature, and I know that can be awkward for somebody, but I think with all the things we've suggested, I think sometimes when I feel like people are pushing against them, I don't want to journal, or I'm not going to ask myself a question every day. It's try it for 6 weeks, and if it doesn't do anything, you can go right back to what you had before. No one's going to stop you.
The cost is not great to start it and try
just
it.
Just try it and give it just a chunk of time.
Yeah,
and then
that's great.
Just I don't know. We used to always say you can have your old life back. No one's gonna keep you from it, but just try it. So try any of this stuff. Go on a hike and don't hurt your hips and back and all that stuff. And don't buy a Tacoma. Sorry, I had to bring that.
Oh my god!
unless you're a girl.
Now you got to work through forgiveness. Oh, there's a lot of forgiveness you got to work through there.
I'm just kidding.
This will be the last you guys hear from Jen on the Overtime podcast. Yeah. That's all good stuff. Any concluding thoughts and everything we've talked about?
I love that I always look to Jordan.
Yeah.
I was just looking at pink Tacomas.
Oh my gosh!
Wow, that's really pink. Please
hey, if it's the 2024, I'll take it.
Yeah, you'd be like, I'm good.
Yeah, honestly, I can repaint that sucker.
I read something today that you can repaint a whole car, $1,200.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, I'll take any colored.
It's a guy on Facebook up north of Taylor.
Okay.
Yeah, just in
Sounds
case you're
a little
wondering.
sketchy, but okay.
Sweet. Hey, thank you guys for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. I think this one felt a little more special to me because it feels like we're just sharing a little bit of the roads that we've been on and our own journeys of what, trying to follow Jesus and what that looks like. And so appreciate it. And for all those listening and watching, we just hope that whatever road you are on in life, that this was something that was helpful or helps you just draw closer to God and whatever those roads are, and invite him into your road in just a new way. And so it's been a great series, lots of good discussions. And I'll just say for where we're going next, Northpoint is we're kicking off a brand new series this next week called Love Where You Live. And it's all based on, I think, a really fresh and new perspective. I mean, granted, Jesus said these words 2,000 years ago, but what it looks like to love your neighbor. And for me personally, just like in the last 6 weeks as we've been thinking about this content, so convicting and challenging in a very tangible way in my life, and even things that we have in our budget because of this. And so I would just say you got to come, you got to watch online. It's going to be great. And Jordan is just gonna share some really compelling stuff throughout this series. So I'm very excited.
Compelling's a word.
I'm
excited.
Yep. I'm a terrible neighbor.
Okay.
Like really bad. So I want you. I'm looking
so
for you.
So Jen
to
will be
come
taking notes.
Unsurprising.
Yeah.
Yep.
Love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned a lot about myself today.
Anyways, thank
Close
you all
with
for
that.
watching and listening. We'll see you next time.